I'm Will Dove, and this is the IWR News for the week ending September 20th. In our top stories this week, how Trudeau broke the Canadian military, an early election appears unlikely, a special report on violence against women around the world and here in Canada, and Google announces a beta test of an online digital ID. Those and 9 more stories that mainstream media won't report, and our government doesn't want you to hear. A new documentary on Canada's military and how it has suffered under the Trudeau regime has been released on YouTube. Canada's military is facing a severe crisis. Current and former defence officials have raised significant alarms about the state of the Canadian Armed Forces, revealing that almost half of the country's military equipment is unserviceable and unavailable. This troubling state of affairs has left Canada woefully unprepared amid rising global security threats from nations like Russia and China. Canada's military is suffering from chronic underfunding and neglect. Defence spending cuts, particularly during the Liberal governments of Jean Chrétien and Justin Trudeau, have led to a serious decline in military readiness. Chrétien's 1993 decision to slash the defence budget led to what military members describe as the Decade of Darkness. The situation seemed to improve slightly under Prime Ministers Paul Martin and Stephen Harper, who initiated several procurement projects. However, these initiatives often faced delays and political interference. For example, the decision-making and procurement process for replacing Canada's aging CF-18 fighter jets has been plagued by controversy and delays, culminating in the eventual purchase of F-35s at a higher cost and a decade behind schedule. Today, the Canadian military's condition is dire. Retired senior military leaders, including former heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, describe the situation as worse than the Decade of Darkness. The Army faces significant equipment shortages, with 80% of its armored kit in storage due to lack of spare parts. The Air Force struggles with outdated machinery and limited operational capacity, while the Navy can barely sustain 3 frigates at sea. You can view this documentary on YouTube. Simply search for Forsaken Warriors, How Trudeau Broke Canada's Military. We will also provide a link below this report. Trudeau's government continues its death spiral, grappling with significant political turbulence following key events that have highlighted the unprecedented unpopularity of the party. A recent by-election in the Montreal riding of LaSalle-Amard-Verdun has resulted in a notable defeat for the Liberals. This riding, traditionally a Liberal stronghold, saw the Bloc Québécois candidate, Louis-Philippe Sauvé, narrowly win by a margin of about 250 votes, securing 28% of the vote compared to 27.2% for the Liberal candidate, Laura Palestini. Justin Trudeau and 15 cabinet ministers had personally canvassed in the area, highlighting the importance of this seat to the party. Trudeau, responding to queries about the loss, suggested that the electorate was, quote, naive and did not fully grasp the critical issues at stake, stating that politics is in a challenging moment and emphasizing the need for greater public understanding of the upcoming election's significance.
What do you think went wrong?
Oh, I think there's all sorts of reflections to take on that, but the big thing is to make sure that Canadians understand that the choice they get to make in the next election about the kind of country we are really matters, and that's the work we're going to continue to do.
No, Justin, I think we're well aware of the significance. Further compounding the Liberals' challenges, Transport Minister Pablo Rodriguez is set to resign from the Trudeau cabinet to pursue leadership of the Quebec Liberal Party. Rodriguez's decision, confirmed by federal Liberal sources, comes in the wake of the by-election defeat. His resignation marks a significant loss for the federal Liberal Quebec caucus, as Rodriguez has been a pivotal figure in Quebec politics and a close ally to Trudeau.
I am announcing that I have decided to enter the race to become leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, where it all began for me. In the coming weeks, you'll be invited to the official launch of my campaign, where I will tell you more about my vision for Quebec, my vision for the Quebec Liberal Party.
Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet has announced that his party will not support the Conservative Party's non-confidence motion aimed at toppling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. This decision significantly reduces the likelihood of an early election, as the Conservatives would need the backing of both the Bloc and the New Democratic Party to succeed in their motion. Unfortunately, it appears that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre will have the support of neither party. Blanchet's refusal to support the non-confidence vote aligns with his strategy to extract concessions and benefits for Quebec, while maintaining a critical stance toward the Liberal government. His decision ensures that the Liberal minority government remains in power, at least for the immediate future, despite increasing political pressure. Despite Jagmeet Singh terminating the supply and confidence agreement with Trudeau's government, he is not eager to force an election, given the NDP's low standing in public opinion polls. This nuanced position allows Singh to maintain the impression of independence from the Liberals, while avoiding the risks associated with a potential electoral defeat. Conservative MP Michael Chong testified at a parliamentary inquiry, emphasizing that Canada has become a playground for foreign interference, specifically by China. This statement aligns with increasing concerns about Canada's vulnerability to foreign influence, particularly given recent findings and ongoing investigations. Commissioner Marie-Josée Hogue, leading the inquiry into foreign interference in Canada, has revealed holding 22 secret meetings with immigrant communities. These meetings, held at undisclosed locations for security reasons, were aimed at gathering experiences on intimidation by foreign agents. Justice Hogue also stated that she would not disclose the names of Canadian politicians suspected of colluding with China. This decision comes amidst increasing public demands for accountability, following a partially redacted report by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The report indicated activities by some members of Parliament that met the definition of foreign interference as described in Section 2 of the CSIS Act. Hogue's interim report cited that the Liberal government's redaction and withholding of documents have hindered her ability to fulfill her role comprehensively. On the global stage, China has announced new restrictions on the export of materials critical to U.S. weapons manufacturing, including antimony, which is used in a variety of military applications such as ammunition, infrared missiles, and night vision goggles. This decision is part of a broader strategy to leverage its dominance in essential minerals, impacting not only the U.S., but also other nations dependent on these resources. The U.S. Department of Defense has acknowledged the critical nature of antimony and the tightening market, prompting American companies like Perpetua Resources to expedite domestic production despite environmental opposition. Also this past week, China has opted out of an international blueprint aimed at preventing an AI arms race, a move that raises significant concerns about global security. The blueprint, supported by 60 nations, including Canada, seeks to establish safeguards for the military use of AI, ensuring human control over AI-driven systems. However, China, along with 30 other countries, declined to back this non-binding agreement. The reluctance to engage in multilateral efforts to regulate AI underscores China's strategic approach to maintain its technological edge in military applications. Experts warn that adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran are unlikely to be deterred by such agreements, emphasizing the importance of deterrence and strategic readiness. It would be hard for most of us to imagine, just a few years ago, that there would be a crisis of violence affecting half the world's population and no one would be speaking out against it. But that is exactly what is happening in many places around the world today. Women are being victimized in record numbers. I warn you that some of the video in this story is extremely disturbing. Since the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan on 15th of August 2021, there's been a significant increase in gender-based violence and femicide. Human rights groups describe the situation as gender apartheid, with Afghan women and girls being systematically excluded from almost all aspects of public life. They are denied access to education, forbidden from most forms of employment, and subjected to severe restrictions on their freedom of movement. The following video, taken from X, shows 4 Taliban men holding a woman while another beats her. I warn you again that this footage is very disturbing. We've taken only an excerpt from the full video. A recent analysis by Afghan Witness, an open-source investigation project, recorded 332 cases of femicide since the Taliban's return to power. However, experts believe this is just the tip of the iceberg. The true scale of the violence is believed to be far higher due to underreporting, the repression of independent media, and the targeting of journalists. The Afghan Witness report also highlighted other forms of gender-based violence, including 115 incidents of sexual violence, such as forced marriages, sexual slavery, and rape, often perpetrated by Taliban officials. Women who defy Taliban-imposed dress codes or other restrictions face arrest and brutal punishment. Femicide is also a growing crisis in Africa. Recent reports from various countries underscore the urgent need for action. In Kenya, femicide cases have been rising alarmingly. According to a recent report by the African Data Hub, at least 500 women have been victims of femicide between 2016 and 2023. The Femicide Count Kenya project recorded 58 deaths labeled as femicides between January and June of this year alone. Activists in Kenya have been pushing for stronger legal protections and better enforcement to combat this violence. In January 2024, thousands of Kenyan women took to the streets to demand an end to femicide, reflecting the growing public outcry. In North Africa, femicide and domestic violence against women are increasingly reported online and by the media. However, legal measures to protect women lag behind. Rights groups in these regions are calling for enhanced legal frameworks and enforcement mechanisms to protect women against gender-based violence. South Africa faces a particularly severe femicide crisis, with the femicide rate being 5 times higher than the global average. On average, 9 women were murdered every day in South Africa in 2022. Community initiatives, such as the Township Caravan Project, are attempting to address the issue by providing therapy and support to survivors of abuse. This video from the Action Society reveals the extent of the crisis. Femicide protests have also been held in Nigeria and Uganda, with women demanding more government action to protect them from gender-based violence. These protests highlight the widespread nature of the problem and the urgent need for systemic change to protect women's rights and lives. In a recent disturbing incident from Bihar, India, a nurse narrowly escaped a gang rape attempt by using a surgical blade to fend off her attackers. Dr. Sanjay Kumar Sanju and 2 others were arrested following the attack. The nurse's quick thinking and bravery were pivotal in her escape. Indian women in the healthcare sector have been vocal about the lack of security and the constant threat of sexual violence they face. This issue gained national attention after the rape and murder of a resident doctor at R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital in Kolkata in early August. The attack, which happened within hospital premises, led to a nationwide doctors' strike and destruction of the emergency room at the hospital by a violent mob. The recent Bihar incident also led to the discovery of blood-stained bedsheets, mobile phones, and alcohol bottles at the hospital, corroborating the nurse's account. In Canada, recent instances of violence against women, particularly within the Muslim community, have raised significant concern. Research projects, such as the 30-month community-based initiative by the Muslim Advisory Council of Canada, aim to address gender-based violence and foster positive social change within the Muslim community. A publication by the Canadian Council of Muslim Women focuses on several forms of violence, including domestic violence, honor-based violence, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. For a first-hand account of this violence against women in Canada, see my recent interview with Yasmin Mohammed, a Canadian woman in Vancouver who was forced into a marriage with a radical Islamist extremist who was later arrested for working with Osama bin Laden. In this week's members version of the IWR News, which you can access with a free 7-day trial at ironwillreport.com, a BC Imam counsels Muslim youth in Canada to hate Jews and Christians. Google announces a test of a digital ID system, explosive devices and rising tensions in the Middle East, escalating drone warfare in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the WEF calls for increased powers for the UN to control us all, our health minister calls for free abortion pills, the second annual Million March for Children, and Pope Francis invites a number of LGBT activists to this year's Synod on Synodality. This report is just one example of the investigative journalism I bring you at ironwillreport.com. My efforts to bring you the truth, with 2 exclusive interviews and 1 counter-narrative news report each week, are entirely funded by viewer subscriptions. I know it's difficult to get used to the idea of paying for news. Since the early days of radio and TV news, we've been able to access it for free. But mainstream media can no longer be trusted. They are funded by our government and large corporations, and they work for them. Independent journalists, such as myself, work for our viewers. If you're not paying for your news, someone else is, and that someone else has an agenda. You can get a free 7-day trial at ironwillreport.com, where you'll be granted instant access. See what you're missing at no cost and no obligation. Memberships are just $9.95 per month, or save 20% with a $99 annual membership. We also have 2 offline payment options for those of you concerned about government surveillance. An interview is coming out this week. On Sunday, our 3rd quarter economic update from my team of financial experts, personal financial consultant Adrian Spitters and Bryce Wade and Warren Keane of New World Precious Metals, where we discuss how we know the current financial system is on the verge of collapse and what you can do to protect your family and your assets. Then on Wednesday, Professor Francis Widdowson, author of Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry, in an in-person interview on how wokeism is destroying Canada, crippling our universities, and feeding false narratives about our Aboriginal peoples. Francis and I discussed the problems facing our Aboriginal peoples and how the current multi-billion-dollar-a-year efforts cannot and will not help them, while leaving Canada open to control of our resources by foreign powers.